Hi, this is Mrs. Cotter. We're going to be working on week 6, day 2. So the first part says to use this bar graph to answer some of the questions. So we're going to look at each question piece by piece. So it says, what is the value of each square on the bar graph? So we want to look at the part where it has our numbers. If we look, it jumps by 2. So 0, 2, 4, 6. So when we say what is the value of each square of the bar graph, 1 square equals 2. So the value of one of these squares is 2. So this is 2, this is 4, this is 6, this is 8. And in between these numbers, it just counts in order. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So half of that square is just the next number up. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But the square itself equals 2. All right, let's look at the next part. Question 2 says, write a number sentence to find out how many total students are enrolled in classes. So we have to look at this bar graph. Each student is for each class. So this 2 equals 2 students. So we have to count each of these by 2s. So let's count baking first. So 2, 4, 6, 8, and stops in the middle, which is 9. So 9 students voted for baking. And I'm just going to make my number sentence as an addition problem. You can do it however you want. So now I'm going to count sports. Remember, it counts by 2s. Each box is 2. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. So 16 people look for sports. And I can count each box by 2s, or I can look at the bar graph and I can look, okay, chorus, it stops a little bit above 12 and stops right in the middle between 12 and 14, 12, 13. So 13 people voted for chorus. And I'm going to look at drama, go across, and see that 18 people voted for drama. And then I have a number sentence, an addition number sentence. So I'm going to figure it out. So I'm going to go 16 plus 13. And I'm going to write on top of each other because that helps me figure it out. Plus 18 plus 9. Let's see if I can, like that. There we go. So 6 plus 3 plus 8 plus 9. What is that? So think 9 plus 8 equals how much? 17 plus 3, 20 plus 6, 26. So I would take that 6, carry the 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 plus 1 is 4. 4 plus 1 is 5. So 56 students enrolled in classes. You can write the number sentence this way, or you can write it a different way. Maybe using a multiplication problem. It's up to you. All right, let's look at number 3. It says, how many fewer students are in sports than in chorus and baking combined? So we have to write a number sentence to show our thinking. So how many fewer students? So let's find out how many people were chorus and baking. We found out it over here, but let's just double check. So we found out that there were 13 people in chorus, and there were 9 people in baking. So we have to add those together because it says combined. So 13 plus 9 equals what? 9 plus 3 equals 12. Carry the 1. That's 22. And then it says how many fewer students, fewer means subtraction, than in sports. And we found out that there were 16 students in sports. So we have to find out this subtraction problem. What is 22 minus 16? If you need to write it this way to help you out, you can do it that way. That's how I think of it. So I know that if I have 2 of something, I can't take 6 away. So I'm going to borrow this 2 from here. That 2 becomes a 12. So 12 minus 6 is 6, and 1 minus 1 is 0. So there were 6 fewer students in sports than in chorus and baking combined. And here is my number sentence. Oops, that was a little bit messy. Let me fix that box. That's my number sentence right there. All right, let's move on. All right, so we're still working on fractions. And we did do this lesson. This is one of the fewer lessons that we're starting to end on, or that we were starting to end on before school ended. So, got to dig back in your brain to think about this. So it says, number 1, estimate to label the given fraction on the number line. Be sure to label the fractions at 0 and 1. Write the fractions above the number line. Draw a number bond to match your number line. So we're going to look at this part first, because this is a lot of words to wrap around your brain. So they wanted us to look for 5 6. They labeled the number bond here at 0 and here at 1. And they labeled 0, 0, 6, and 6, 6. Now, you might be thinking, how did they know it was by 6? Well, you can just count the spaces in between the lines, the marks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If there's 6 spaces in between the marks, I know that they're counting by 6. Also, they found out 5 6 because if I count the tally marks, 1, 2, in between 0 and 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they have 5 tally marks, and that would be 5 6. If I was to label the rest of this, this would be 0 6, this would be 1 6, 2 6, 3 6, oops, 2 6, 3 6, and so on until we got to 5 6. 1 6, 2 6, 3 6, 4 6, 5 6, and 6 6. Okay, now they asked us to write a number bond. So they wanted us to make a number bond that is going to equal to 1 whole. Well, we know that 5 6 plus 1 6 will equal 6 6, which will equal 1 whole. Remember, the bottom number stays the same. You just add the top numbers, 5 plus 1, which equals 6, and 6 6 equals 1 whole. And we see that that 1 is right under 6 6. All right, let's move on. So the next one says 2/3. They want us to label 2/3. Well, we have to make sure that we have, I'm going to look at that top number, and I'm going to put 2 tally marks. Try to making them as equal as possible, 1 and 2. I also want to make sure that I have 3 spaces in between my tally marks because I'm counting by thirds. So 1, 2, 3. Good. So I have 3 spaces. They have 0/3, 1/3, and they want us to label 2/3, so I'm going to put 2/3 in red. Now you don't have to write that 1/3 in there. I just did because it helps me. So 2/3. I'm going to circle that. And they had us write a number bond that's going to equal to 1 whole. Well, we know that 2/3 plus 1/3 should equal 3/3. Remember the number on the bottom stays the same. 2 plus 1 equals 3, and 3/3 does equal 1. And remember, they labeled the 0 and the 1 at the bottom to show that 0/3 equals 0 and 3/3 equals 1. Whenever you're drawing a number line, you need to always make sure that you are labeling that 0 and the 1 at the end of your number line. Okay, for example 2, it says Claire made 6 equally spaced knots on her ribbon as shown. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So she makes 6 knots and they're equally spaced. So now the first question is asking how many equal parts are formed by the 6 knots. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to count the spaces in between the knots to find out how many equal spaces there are. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 equal parts, and that shows me that I'm going to make this number line in fifths. If I have the 5 equal spaces, that is going to tell me that there are 5 equal parts, and my fraction will be labeled in fifths. The next one says, what fraction of the rope is labeled at the 4th knot? So I'm going to look 1, 2, 3, 4, and at the 4th knot is 3/5, just like what it says right here. All right, now we're going to try an example. So it says, for his boat, James stretched out a rope with 5 equally spaced knots. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Part A says, starting at the 1st knot and ending at the last knot, how many equal parts are formed by the 5 knots? Label each fraction at the knot. So we're going to do the first part. It wants us to know how many equal parts are formed. So remember, to find out how many equal parts, we need to count the spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So there are 4 equal parts. Then it wants to label it. So remember, we always start as 0 and 1. So if I have 4 equal parts, that means that this fraction is going to be in fourths. So 0/4 is going to be the first dot. Then the next dot would be 1/4. The second dot would be 2/4. The third knot would be 3/4. And the last one would be 4/4. Good. So we labeled it. 4 equal parts. That tells me it's in fourths. And I labeled each knot. All right, let's see what part B says. It says, what fraction of the rope is labeled at the 3rd knot? So we have to count each knot. 1, 2, 3, and at the 3rd knot, we have 2/4. So the fraction at the 3rd knot is 2/4. All right, and let's look at part C. It says, what if the rope had 6 equally spaced knots along the same lengths? What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw it and make sure it has 6 equal knots, because that's what it says, 6 equally spaced knots. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And you should draw your own rope with 6 equally spaced knots as well. Then I'm going to label my fractions first. Before I even read on, I'm going to label it. So let me count how many spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, if there's 5 spaces, I know that it needs to be in fifths. So I'm going to start labeling it. 0/5, 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, and 5/5. Now, be careful, because it says 6 knots, don't think it's in 6. You have to count the spaces in between the knots to figure out what fraction you're working on. So we counted the spaces, and because I had 5 spaces in between my knots, I knew that it would be in fifths. Well, let's see what the remaining says. It says, what fraction of the rope will be measured by the first 2 knots? So 1, 2, and that would be 1/5. Okay, so you've got to make sure that you read the directions carefully, and you also need to make sure that if it says 6 equally spaced knots, that's telling you how many knots there are. You have to count the spaces in between the knots to figure out what fraction it is. All right, let's move on. All right, number 1 says, write the fraction above the number line. Draw a number bond to match your number line. So we have to put our fraction, and we have to always also draw a number bond. So the first fraction they want us to find is 3/4. So they labeled 0 and 1 on the ends. That's good, because that's the first part that we have to do. So what I'm going to do is, before I even start drawing my lines and partitioning my number line, I'm going to write my fractions for 0 and 1. So I know it's 3/4, so I know that this fraction is going to be 0/4, and 1/2 in fourths is 4/4. Now I can start partitioning my fraction. So I'm going to count 0/4, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and 4/4. Now to find 3/4, I can label each one, but I'm going to count out loud until I get to 3/4 and label it that way. So 0/4, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. So 3/4 would be right here. All right, now let's go on to B. So we have to find 3/5. So remember, they labeled 0 and 1 on our number line. First, I'm going to write in my fractions for 0 and 1, label my endpoints first. So I know it's in fifths, so this is going to be 0/5, and this is going to be 5/5, because 5/5 equals 1 whole in fifths. Now I'm going to start partitioning my number line. 0/5, 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, and 5/5. Even though the fraction is 3/5, I'm not going to stop at 3/5. I need to count all the way until I get to 5/5. Now I can count and find 3/5. So I'm going to count aloud again. 0/5, 1/5, 2/5, 3/5. So I'm going to label 3/5. Now remember, you can label each fraction if you want to, but I'm counting out loud. And I just remembered we're going to do our number bonds at the end. So I'm going to label and partition first, and then we'll do our number bonds. All right, so next one is 5, 6. Label my endpoints first, 0 and 1. So I know it's in 6, so this is going to be 0/6. And 1 whole in 6 is 6/6. Now I can partition it. Remember, I'm going to count all the way until I get to 6/6. So 0/6, 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, 4/6, 5/6, and 6/6. Now I can label 5/6. Again, I'm going to say it out loud. 0/6, 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, 4/5, and 5/6. 5/6 is right here. All right, now the next one is 3/10. Again, I'm going to label my endpoints. So in tenths, 0 is 0/10. That equals 0. And 1 whole is 10/10. Now I'm going to label it 0/10, 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10, 10/10. Now I can label 3/10. So I'm going to count aloud again. 0/10, 1/10, 2/10, 3/10. That's right here. Now, if you see, if I was to count the spaces in between each tally mark, we would see that it would land on the number that's on the bottom of our fraction. So for example, let's look at 3/4. If I count the spaces in between the tally marks, I should get that number on the bottom, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 spaces, and that shows me that I'm counting in fourths, just like what we said. Again, even if I count the spaces for the tenths, I should land on 10 spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Because I have 10 spaces, that tells me that I'm counting in tenths. Now let's do our number bond. So let's look at our number bond for A. So remember, when we do a number bond, we need to do a fraction for 1 whole, okay? So we have 1 whole, and we're going to put 3/4 in the first one because that's the number that we found, 3/4. Now 3/4 plus what is going to equal 4/4? Well, we see that there's 1 space, so that's going to be 1/4. 3 plus 1/4 equals 1 whole. Now let's look at B. Remember, 1 is going to go on the top, and the fraction that we found was 3/5, so I'm going to put that as my label, my first bond. And 3/5 plus what is going to equal 1 whole. Let's count how many spaces it is to get to 5/5, to get to that 1. Well, 1 space, 2 space, so 2 fifths is going to equal 1 whole. 3 plus 2 equals 5. 5 on the bottom, 5 fifths, that equals 1. Okay? Now we're going to do the number bond for C. Okay, we found the fraction 5 sixths. Let's how many spaces is it between 5 and 6 sixths? 1 space, so 1 6. All right, and our last number bond, so 1 and 3/10. I'm going to put it above so that you guys can see it. Now count how many spaces is going to be between 3/10 and 10/10. Or you can think about, okay, 3 plus what equals 10? All right, so let's count the spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7 spaces, so that's going to be 7/10. And again, I should get to 10/10. 3 plus 7 equals 10. So it'll be 10/10. And that's how we do our number bond. Count the spaces to find that other number. You would label the number that you found, the fraction that you found, and then think about how many spaces is it going to be from the number that you found to 1 whole. Okay, let's move on. It says partition the number line, then place each fraction on the number line. 3 6, 1 6, and 5 6. So the first thing I always do is I label my endpoints first. Well, because I know that they're all 6, I know that it's going to be by 6. So this is going to be 0 6, 0 endpoint is going to be 0 6, and the 1 endpoint is going to be 6 6, because that equals 1 whole. Now, my second part is I can partition it. So again, I'm counting out loud. 0 6, 1 6, 2 6, 3 6, 4 6, 5 6, and 6 6. Now I can start finding the fractions. So the first one says 3 6, well 0 6, 1 6, 2 6, 3 6. All right, I found that one. Now I'm finding 1 6, so again 0 6, 1 6, and you can see I'm counting out loud because that helps me. Now if you can count in your head and do it, that's fine, but also counting out loud helps you hear yourself, so that it might be a little bit easier. And the last one it wants us to find is 5 6. So 0 6, 1 6, 2 6, 3 6, 4 6, 5 6. And that's how we do it. All right. So remember, the first thing you want to do is label your endpoints. Then you can partition your number line, and then you can find your fraction that it's asking you to find. So endpoints, partition, then find your fraction. All right. Also, I want to point out, you see that my tick marks, they're in equal parts. Make sure that you're not making your number line like this. I don't want to see that. If we're working on fractions, they need to have equal parts, as close as possible. This is not what I want to see. Your fractions should be separated as equally as possible as you can. If you look at all my fractions, they're separated as equally as I can. All right? And you also see when we did this, we labeled our endpoints first, then we partitioned our fraction, and then I labeled my fraction. Okay? All right. And that's it for week 6, day 2. Remember, if you have any questions, you can contact me or Miss Fifield or Miss Fisher. Also, if you don't know your Zern account and you want to go on Zern, contact either me or Miss Fifield. We have the accounts for you. Also, for week 6, days 4 and 5 are going to be combined, and Miss Fifield is going to teach them, because day 4 and 5, they only have about 2 questions on each page. So that video is going to be together. All right, and I'll talk to you guys next week. All right, bye.